The quiet fear of death. There is a thought most people avoid, not because it is complicated, but because it is uncomfortable. The idea that one day everything ends. Not dramatically, not with warning, just ends. And even if you don't think about it often, it lingers somewhere in the background, in quiet moments, in still nights, in the spaces between distractions. A question forms, soft but heavy. What happens when I'm no longer here? Some people push it away. They stay busy. They fill their time with noise. Not because they are careless, but because silence brings that thought closer. Others face it, but with fear. Not just fear of death itself, but fear of what it means. The end of control, the end of plans, the end of everything familiar. And maybe the deeper fear is this: did I really live? Because death doesn't just remind you that life ends. It forces you to question what you're doing with the time you have. Are you living intentionally, or just moving through days without awareness? This is why the fear feels so strong. It's not only about dying, it's about realizing time is limited. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. But here is something most people miss. The awareness of death is not meant to weaken you, it's meant to sharpen you, to bring clarity. Because when you understand that time is not endless, you begin to choose differently. You stop delaying things that matter. You stop holding on to things that don't. You become more present, more honest, more intentional. The small moments begin to feel different. A conversation, a quiet walk, a simple breath, things that once felt ordinary now feel real, because you know they won't last forever. And strangely, that realization brings a kind of peace, not because death disappears, but because you stop running from it. You accept it. And in that acceptance, something shifts. You stop fearing the end and start paying attention to the now. Because the truth is simple. You don't control how long you live, but you do control how deeply you live. And maybe that's enough, not to eliminate the fear, but to transform it into awareness, into presence, into a life that feels lived.
And the more you begin to sit with that idea, the more you start to notice something else. It's not just death that people are afraid of, it's the awareness of time passing. You start to see it in small ways, days that feel shorter than they used to, weeks that disappear without much memory, months that pass, almost unnoticed. And that realization can be unsettling, because it feels like life is moving faster than you are. You begin to think about things you said you would do, but haven't, conversations you wanted to have, but postponed, changes you knew you needed to make, but delayed. And slowly, that quiet fear takes a different shape. It's no longer just about dying. It's about not using the time you have. And that is where it becomes heavy, because deep down, you know when you are not living fully. You can feel it in the way your days repeat, in the way your energy feels low, in the way you avoid certain thoughts. It's not loud, but it's there, a quiet awareness that something could be different, that something should be different. And this is where most people turn away. Not because they don't care, but because facing it requires change, real change. Not because they don't care, but because facing it requires change, real change. The kind that is uncomfortable, the kind that forces you to let go of habits, the kind that asks you to be honest with yourself. So instead, they distract themselves again. More noise, more activity, more movement without direction. And for a while, it works, until the silence returns. Because silence always returns. And when it does, that same question comes back. What am I really doing with my life? But here is where something important can happen. Instead of running from that question, you stay with it. Not to judge yourself, not to feel guilty, but to understand. To observe your life as it is, without pretending, without filtering, without distractions. And when you do that, clarity begins to form. Not all at once, but in small realizations. You begin to see what matters, what feels real, what feels empty. You start to notice where your time goes, where your energy goes, what you give your attention to, and slowly, you begin to make adjustments. Not dramatic changes, just small, intentional shifts. You spend more time on what matters. You let go of what doesn't. You become more present in moments instead of rushing through them. You say things you used to hold back. You act on things you used to delay. And something begins to change. The fear doesn't disappear completely, but it loses its weight, because now you are living more consciously. You are no longer drifting, you are choosing, and that makes a difference. Because the fear of death is strongest when life feels unclear, when days feel empty, when direction feels missing. But when you begin to live with intention, even in small ways, something shifts. You stop measuring life only by time and start measuring it by depth, by presence, by meaning. And in that shift, you realize something simple but powerful. You don't need to control the end, to give value to the present. You don't need certainty about tomorrow, to live fully today. Because life was never meant to be controlled completely. It was meant to be experienced. And maybe that is where peace comes from. Not from avoiding the idea of death, but from no longer feeling like you are wasting life. From knowing that in your own way, you are showing up. You are trying. You are living. And when that becomes true, even quietly, the fear begins to soften. Not because death is no longer there, but because life finally is.